Hey everybody, time for another Adventures in Aberrant Psychology, where I dish the dirt on what I saw on the job in order to prepare others for maybe a career following in my footsteps, doing the dirty work that society doesn't really want to look at all the time, or just, letting people be voyeurs for 10 minutes at a time into this world. Either way, so I went about 2 weeks without having a very interesting client. It's great when that happens, when I can grow my sleeping people farm, and none of the patients are awake for the duration of my shift. That's awesome. I love checking out Reddit /r/justice porn. If you don't know reddit.com, front page of the internet, check it out. But a lot of behaviorists and security guards and CNAs in my line of work have been passing around the subreddit justice porn. It's not pornographic. It's kind of like the subreddit tank porn is not pornographic. It's more like instant karma, people who mess up and then, due to circumstances that they pretty much create for themselves, it catches them in their crimes or whatnot. And, I feel like on our side of things, there's a camaraderie amongst people who give public services to people that it's being kind of discriminated against by media of late, and especially by activists of late, as just an easy target that doesn't fight back. You can say that policemen are mean, or nurses are mean, or a certain hospital system is mean, the VA hospital system is mean, doctors are uncaring, but are they going to respond to that? No, they're just going to keep on doing their good work, There isn't really a public media image group that deals with just how people perceive people who deliver public services, But I do get thanked on the job sometimes by people who feel that I've done nice things, and there are other times that I get thanked when people realize how horrible they've been, or how horrible their loved one has been, in the case of people picking up drunks. But in one case in particular, just last week, I had someone's mother come and thank us for all the hard work we did. And she didn't realize how bad her daughter was acting until another patient had to come in to get med cleared. Now, med cleared means this patient will not be mine. I work contracted to the hospital, and if a patient needs to be guarded on an M1 hold, then I will watch them. I will keep them in their room. I will be their liaison for healthcare, whatnot. But if someone's coming in to get med cleared, that means they are under arrest by police, who are going to be doing all the watching of them on their own. It doesn't cost the hospital anything extra. The policeman will be right there in the doorway saying, nope, you're going to get some health care. The nurse is going to come in, draw some blood. If you need a CT scan because you say that I hit you in the head, we're going to go get that for you. This is something that happens with a lot of criminals who want to complain that they've been injured in the course of being arrested. So it doesn't delay their in processing to jail that much. Sometimes it can take, 6, 7 hours for some tests to be done, like getting the results of a CT scan back at 3 in the morning when there's no one to really examine it. There's a shortage of people around that time. But, normally a med clear can be in and out in 1 or 2 hours. You know, blood tests and urinalysis and everything. And this particular med clear that happened was a woman who was arrested in a hotel room, and there was much cocaine in the hotel room. And the officer was actually afraid for her health that she might have consumed a lot of the cocaine in order to hide it. And I can see why he would think that she was extremely high, because she was the loudest patient I've heard all year, and some of the things she said were absolutely berserk. She kept saying pig, of course, She would hit on one of the officers, going so far as to say, I'm going through all of this. At least by the end of this night, you got to give me your number. But then she would turn right to the other one and, turn so quickly and say, fucking pig, what are you looking at? What are you looking at? And she would start singing crazy songs really, really loudly, getting all the attention of the entire emergency department. Things like, I don't sell Molly no more. I got the green, I got the white, what? And I was like, what song is that? What is she singing? Because I've never heard it. Sounds like it might be some sort of club song. And she would make accusations that the policemen only arrested her because they wanted to get her alone in a room and do things to her, because she's got pussy on point. What? You want this. And at one point, she put her hands on her hospital bed, pointed her butt at the policeman, and whipped her hair around. And it was like, has this girl done porn shoots? Because she's got the poses, but she's disgusting. And when the policeman had to actually restrain her further, she would scream, ow, you're hurting me, pig! Stop it, pig! And I felt like, if you're genuinely being hurt, don't call the person that is hurting you pig. You don't call him asshole. You just say, I'm hurt, ow. You don't make it worse by calling them names. But this one particular patient was so loud that another patient's mother actually came out of her room and apologized to us for her daughter's actions, which, in comparison, were slight. Her daughter was just off her meds and very demanding for maybe 30 minutes, and kept complaining about different ailments in ways that we thought was attention-seeking at one point, but nowhere near as bad as Mrs. Pussy on Point, what? I don't even get that. A more tame patient that I had in the last 2 weeks that was interesting to a point. I arrived for an entire shift with one patient up on the floors, not in the emergency room. And I go to this hospital that I rarely go to, and I'm put on a patient who is 65 years old, right? And his daughter is in the room. I don't know if he was actually 65, just guessing. He was in his 60s. His daughter's in the room. And she's telling me things about this patient that just don't add up. Because he can't even get applesauce onto a spoon and eat it. In the first 10 minutes, I'm like, does he have a TBI? Is there something wrong with his brain? And she tells me no. What happened was he was sick from like the flu. He was at work. He owns his own business. I can't say what kind, because I would narrow it down as to who it is, but he owns his own business, and one of his employees took him to the emergency room because he looked very sick. And his condition worsened as his stay in the hospital lengthened. And he had been in the hospital for about 2 weeks. And now he's to the point where he can barely function. He was on benzodiazepines, which were making him aggressive. And that's why I was there. Because he had been aggressive in the past. He wasn't for days, but he had scared the nursing staff, and they wanted big guys in the room. So I'm wondering, like, what is it that this guy could have? Because his scans in his head came back clear. You know, there's nothing physically wrong with this guy. And I came to the conclusion that the most likely thing that was wrong with this patient was withdrawal delirium, right? And they weren't going to give him any benzodiazepines because any sort of downer is going to affect their ability to diagnose him, because they're going to have symptoms from the downer. But those downers might actually give him back some function. You know, even if his function is to be a mean SOB and you know, want to start striking out because he doesn't want to be in the hospital anymore. But what's interesting about this is, in a third world country, he might have gotten better care as far as diagnosing him. They got him all the way to this point of not even barely being able to function. He's a fall risk. I had to help this guy to the bathroom because he couldn't hardly walk. I had to put a belt around his chest and pick him up, you know, and basically carry half of his weight on his way to the bathroom. He was nothing like what he was 2 weeks prior when he just came into the hospital for flu-like symptoms, you know. So the most simplest explanation that I could come up with, the most direct explanation, withdrawal delirium, that he had been a secret alcoholic. And his daughter was acknowledging this. Like, she could not believe that her own father was drinking that much that he would have symptoms like this. But this guy was getting on in years, you know. And if you think about a whole lifetime of drinking and how sometimes tolerance gets lessened when, you know, liver function starts to decline in your later life, I can see it. And the way that he would get better treatment in a third world country. In a third world country, a doctor might as a diagnostic tool, give this guy a beer. Hair of the dog. It works. I've seen it before where someone is withdrawing and they are completely incapacitated and zombified by withdrawal. And one beer wakes them up. But that's something that you can't do in a U.S. hospital. So this guy could probably go back to work for, say, the rest of his work life left. He's in his mid-60s, He could probably get his business affairs in order to, maybe go into treatment after finishing his career in a year or two, get some treatment to get off of the alcohol. He could probably go through life one beer a day, but the first beer is something that he can't get because he's on a medical hold in a hospital. And it's strange that they get all of these different scheduled drugs that are so horrible when people get them on the streets. But the one drug that they can't use, even diagnostically, is alcohol. Just give them a beer. Okay, the last story I'm going to tell you is me losing my cool at work again, in the face of extreme stupidity on the part of someone else. I was watching a patient who was completely compliant and in their bed and just talking to themselves, really, when another patient gets put in the room next to the one that I'm watching. And sometimes when you have observation rooms, someone gets placed in, but the hospital doesn't want to pay for a behaviorist or security guard or a CNA to watch that patient. They just want to put them in a room next to a room that's being watched because there's already someone that could just jump over and help out, And we do. But this is one of those cases where this person came in and should have been put on an ETOH hold. It's a special kind of M1 hold. It's a different type, but same rules apply, right? This guy comes in on a stretcher, and the two EMTs that are bringing him in, they say that he's drunk, and he's got a giant gash coming out of his forehead, right? And it's bleeding profusely to the point... It stopped bleeding, but it basically put blood all the way down the center of his face. And so he's drunk, and they don't want him to get out of the stretcher by himself. They had to get him into the ambulance from some strange place where they put a stretcher on top of the gurney. So they want to assist him, but he's saying, just untie me, I'll get down, and I'm like, no, you're not making it. They get him into the hospital bed in a observation room where there's nothing else in there, just him in the bed. And 1 minute later, nursing staff's in there cleaning up his head, and his forehead has a distinctive pattern on it. It kind of looks like cornflakes, and what comes out from him as the reason why his forehead is cut up in that pattern is his wife beat him over the head with a log from the firewood pile. And to look at his forehead, it really did look like the shape of bark impressed onto a forehead. Completely plausible given the shape of those cuts. It really looked like pine tree bark. So, no one was assigned to watch him constantly, but because he made that outcry of domestic violence, a security guard had to go in and take a statement that would be faxed to the police department. While that security guard was in the room, and because this patient had no one assigned to watch him constantly, he got a visitor walking down the hallway, and I saw her coming. I couldn't do anything about it because it's not my patient, right? I wanted to go, somebody stop her. His wife, who he was giving the report to the security guard about for domestic violence, walks into the room while he's giving the report. The security guard wrapped it up pretty quickly, just to get out of that very tense situation. And his wife was not hitting him, but she was having choice words with him. I couldn't really make out exactly what she was saying, but she was saying them in a manner that was really beating on him while he's down. He's drunk. He's got a gashed up forehead, and the person that did it to him, the person that assaulted him, is in there probably saying, "What are you doing getting the police involved?" So his nurse had come in and out, just, doing things for his forehead, and finally had to put some, they were liquid stitches, like super glue on his forehead and patch him up. And I talked to his nurse. I said, "Hey, you know who that is in the room, right? That's his wife, the one that beat him on the head with the log." And his nurse was like, "What? Why isn't anyone in there?" I'm like, "Because he wasn't assigned anyone to watch him. He even after becoming a victim of domestic violence and having that outcry, no one was assigned to watch him." And the nurse is like, "Oh shit, what do we do?" So I told one of the other security guards the situation, and he was able to just go in there and say, "Ma'am, I'd like you to wait in the waiting room because we want to do some more tests on your husband." And she did. She went out and waited in the waiting room. Good. At least they're separate, right? So, the point where I lost it. A physician's assistant, female, she goes into the room after he's been there like 30 minutes. And she's one of those physician's assistants that works for the hospital and is really mindful of there are patients with insurance and there are patients that need the hospital's care and drunk patients who can be assessed as clinically sober. If they can walk and they can call a cab, get their ass out. She's, trying everything. Well, this guy, he couldn't walk, right? But she's really not wanting him taking up that bed. So she, of course, asks him one of the other options to get rid of a drug patient. She asks him, "Is there anyone you can call to come pick you up? Because another way you can, legally let someone out of an ETOH hold is to have some sober, responsible adult come sign for them and take them home. So he, of course, says, "Yeah, my wife is here." And she is okay with that. And during the course of her talk with him, he changes his story and says that she did not beat him with a log. She comes out of the room and says, "Yep, he's going home with his wife." And I stood up from the station that I was at, and I went over and said, "He's not going home with his wife. You can't do that." And she's a little upset because it's not my patient. I'm sticking my nose in something, else. Something that I'm not assigned to. And she really was condescending in saying, "Well, what do you know? This guy is just drunk and he's going home with his wife. End of story." I was like, "No. He was beat up by his wife. You can't send him home with his wife." And she said, "Well, he changed his story. He said he fell down and hit a bottle." I said, "It doesn't matter if he changed his story after she came and saw him. He made that report. We can't send him home with her." At this point, she's livid with me for getting in her way. And I raised my voice and I said to her, "You wouldn't be doing this if that was a woman." She didn't like me talking to her that way. So she went off to report me to my boss. And it was at that point, unbeknownst to me at the time, but it was at that point off somewhere else that she found out that she was in the wrong and that I was right. Little side note, the law that I was referring to would be the Violence Against Women Act, which it isn't really appropriately named for this circumstance, but that's where you would find that someone is not allowed to recant something like that and get treatment such as being released to their accused assailant. We have to take the first outcry seriously. We have to take all of the outcry seriously. No one that somebody reports that they were hit by are they allowed to be given into their custody. It's no one. It's wrong. People can be pressured like this guy was. He even, a couple minutes later, walked out of his room and came over to my desk, and I wasn't even, in his room taking his report or anything. He came over to my desk. He's like, "Could you get the people back in my room? Because I want to take back what I said." I was like, "You need to just go back in your room. We're going to handle it." So, at that moment, he was not released to the custody of his wife. But I'm sorry this story doesn't end on a happy note. Because the same physician's assistant made a beeline for that room about 2 hours later. Didn't look me in the eye at all. Right? She goes right into the room, stands him up, does a little field sobriety test inside the room, declares him clinically sober, goes out of the room without making eye contact with me, and tells a nurse to get his discharge paperwork ready because he's clinically sober. The man got discharged, walked walked out of his room, went out to the lobby where his wife was waiting for him, and they went home. He went home with her. I did what I could, you know. At least he was able to walk in case he needed to defend himself, but I feel like the hospital was still left in a position where they would be liable if she were to pull over and beat him on the side of the road after leaving the hospital, or take him home and do anything else bad to him for reporting her. You know, I feel like we still dropped the ball, but you know, you can't win them all. You know, sometimes you can only make things a little bit better. You know, and you just have to console yourself that sometimes you made things better, but you still can't say, you know, another life saved. It's like another life lengthened by 2 hours. You know. Well, until next time, everybody, don't piss anyone off while you're drunk when there's firewood around.